And welcome. You're watching Newsx and I'm Vaishali Kohli. Now, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has demanded that the US respect Canadian sovereignty after reports emerged that Trump administration officials held secret meetings with a separatist group in Alberta. The group, Alberta Prosperity Project, is seeking support for a potential referendum on the oil-rich province's independence. Speaking alongside Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, Carney said he has been clear with President Trump on the need to uphold Canada's unity. All right, so I have my guests joining me on the broadcast very shortly. But of course, viewers, this is the constant push and pull that is being caused by President Trump geopolitically. And what we've been seeing in 2025 and 2026 is indeed very, very surprising, the kind of things that President Trump really is up to. And of course, now Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has demanded that the US respect Canadian sovereignty, which is a point that is of contention everywhere, really, whether it comes to Greenland or, of course, Canada. The fact that President Trump is trampling on the sovereignty and respect of different countries is something that really the world is watching. Now, of course, after reports emerged that Trump administration officials held secret meetings with a separatist group in Alberta. This, of course, has come after this came out, the secret meeting. And post that, of course, the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has made a very strong statement which is aimed towards the United States and has asked them to respect Canadian sovereignty. Now, let's talk about the group, which is Alberta Prosperity Project. Of course, the group is seeking support for a potential referendum on the oil-rich province's independence. Speaking alongside Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, Carney said he's been clear with President Trump on the need to uphold Canada's unity. So that's a strong message that has been put across to Trump. And of course, the relations now, as we can already see, are strained. Initially, Trump had given out statements saying that Canada is because really the US is. And even at that time, the Canadian Prime Minister had asserted that Canada, of course, had an identity of its own. I do have Mr. Manan Dwivedi. He's an international affairs expert joining me on the broadcast. Mr. Dwivedi, welcome. And the kind of things that Trump really is doing, I mean, the world, of course, is watching, but now, of course, we have the Canadian Prime Minister who's demanded that the US respects the sovereignty of Canada. What would you like to say on that?
I personally feel, as a student of international relations, that the entire idea is that Canada, Mexico, and United States of America, which is sandwiched between Canada in the north and Mexico in the south, they form a one entity, kind of a North American subcontinent. And if we look at the historicity, and if we delve inside the contemporary context also, then people, as far as economic diplomacy, trade, investment, migration, and as far as other societal goodies of international life are concerned, Canada and Mexico and America, they seem to appear as a kind of a conjoined territorial and societal and cultural entity. This is one point which I wanted to make, and I personally feel that there happens to be nil to no animosity, politically and diplomatically, between the agendas of Mexico and Canada with US. So this kind of a theme, which has been initiated by President Donald Trump, first talking about Greenland and threatening Denmark about it, and causing ruffles in the European Union, that seems to be supplanted as far as plain Jane and innocent Canadians are concerned. I personally feel civilizational contacts are very prominent between US and Canada. And if you look into the Great Lake region, what we are going to find is that it is difficult for a student of geography like me, seated in New Delhi, to differentiate between the boundaries in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Erie, these lakes I'm talking about. So, a kind of a cosmopolitan oneness has always been associated with America and Canada. And I personally feel that Canada has no wrong issues in its mind to militate against American power, wealth and sovereignty. So what Donald Trump is doing is that he himself is doing something which the Americans are fighting for. What I mean is that internal security concerns when he meets with separatists from Alberta, or if the Quebec people are once again instigated by any other country, it completely harms the national interest. It harms the bonhomie and the stability and the solidity, or something which is very, very much there, the collectivity which North America formed. Though there have been internecine conflicts as far as the NAFTA agreement between America and Canada is concerned, but I think things should not come to such a passe that Canada will be punished for something which it has never done. And I think it is completely unethical and it is a contravention of international law to talk to the separatist rebels or terror mongers in a country which Trump seems to be seemingly doing. This is what I would like to say.
All right. Now, I also want to ask you that, does this cross a red line? I mean, of course, we're talking about national sovereignty, but how do you see this diplomatically? A lot of countries have reacted, but is there really a way to draw a line when it comes to President Trump?
I personally feel that nobody can draw a line. Ma'am, to be very practical and to be very pragmatic about American intrusions and the way they are backed up by their military and economic strength, I don't think any of the countries, not even China, can take a step, or even the Ruskies. Nobody can contain President Donald Trump. But I think he's definitely, I am a student of international relations and American affairs, and as far as the American visage and positivity about its image, its diplomatic image is concerned, we are also bothered like we are bothered about New Delhi and our own country. So, as far as India-US contacts are concerned, we are pretty much satisfied despite the tariffs. But Canada happens to be a kind of a backyard for United States of America, wherein they have been getting succor and help from Canada, and that white Anglo-Saxon vast imagery. That is one of the reasons, and religion being another reason why Canada and America have always found out themselves to be on the same side of the fence. Now, I think Canada being a soft state, Donald Trump is taking a leaf out of his dictatorial hat actually and troubling the Canadians. But I think Donald Trump has to learn that Canada and India are not Iraq. They are not Syria. Canada is not Venezuela, or Canada is not North Korea. So, it is very nice. I would applaud myself if President Donald Trump were to impinge upon the sovereignty, as you had said, ma'am, and the national security concerns of countries like Venezuela and other countries. But when it comes to Canada, I would use a very explicit term. I would say they are diplomatic blood brothers. They are diplomatic blood brothers. And though Canada has been sometimes it has been very independent in its foreign policy and diplomacy by going all out with Switzerland and Japan in the 80s and 90s on the topic of human security. But still, that does not mean that it is open to a reprimand by a hegemon, which unfortunately for India and Canada, and precisely for Canada, Donald Trump has turned into. That is what I would like to say.
All right. Mr. Dwivedi, now I also want to ask you, now there's another important point. Now, how serious is it in diplomatic terms if a US administration engages with a separatist group inside a close ally's territory?
I think it's a contravention. I think it's a contravention of international law and a contravention of the established canons of political science and accepted code of conduct in the realm of international behavior. So I think if President Trump is doing something which is very much similar to what Adolf Hitler and Mussolini did in the World War II time. For example, I'll give you a historical example, and we cannot always run away from history. That is what Adolf Hitler was advised by the Americans, by other people in his own allies, who were his allies, not to go open two fronts in World War II. That is, opening a front against Britain and France was one part of it, and they had succeeded in throwing out the allies through the Battle of Normandy. But when Adolf Hitler opened the front with Russia, they got a massive bloody nose, and more than a bloody nose, in the Battle of Kursk and Battle of Leningrad. So I think President Donald Trump, if he wants to play with fire into instigating a world war, he should not do it with his allies like Canada, because Canada has always been steadfastly glued to the American concerns. And I personally feel that it is inexplicable that President Donald Trump should talk to the separatists. Because when the Pakistanis and the Americans used to in 1990s talk to the J&K separatists, it was a very rankling factor. And it was very painful for the citizens like us and also for the governmental establishment. So the same America which talked about liberty, liberalism, rule of law, constitutionalism, and the international norm setting. I think President Trump is overdoing his mandate as the most powerful man in the world, and I personally feel Canadians have always been have faced this strife of internal security, where Quebec can be pointed out, where Alberta can be pointed out. And as far as India is concerned, we have been very considerate and we have been very careful not to interfere in the internal affairs of Canada, which is what President Donald Trump is doing. But in some kind of a madcap frenzy, if he is trying to indulge in a revolution, then I personally feel that would be inimical to the general public diplomacy image of America, even after President Donald Trump leaves the White House after a couple of years. So that is what I would like to argue here.